Michael Gurstein is the Executive Director at the Center for Community Informatics Research in Vancouver, one of my favorite cities in the world, beautiful place. And he's mentoring open data research projects in India and Sierra Leone. So very exciting things. And there you are, Michael.
Coming at the end of the day, I'm not sure how much new I have to say, but information access versus information use. Who is Satish Shetty? He's an Indian right to information activist. Mr. Shetty, 38, was killed by 3 unidentified men on the morning of January 13, 2010 in Talagaon, Pune. He had been actively using the right to information to expose land scams and fake registration cases in the Talagaon area, following on from open land registration initiatives in Lon Avla and Dehu Road regions of Naval, India. Mr. Shetty is a martyr to open data. Mr. Shetty was not murdered for having access to information. He was murdered for trying to use the information to achieve social change. From a tweet, uploading 1 million documents to the internet doesn't help people who don't know how to sift through them. Creating opportunities for open data, information, knowledge, government is the easy part. Creating the means to open data, information, knowledge, government for social change is the hard part. The data divide is the divide between those who are able to access and use open digital data and those who aren't. Thomas Hobbes designs an app. Background. Getting clean water is a problem in slum environments. So finding sources of clean water should be something of benefit to citizens, yes? So as a class project at a major university, students were invited to develop a smartphone app to help the folks in the slum to find clean water. What they did was to link a GPS to a crowdsourcing tool and allow folks to input the specific location and quality of the commercial water sellers as they worked their way through the local community. Sounds pretty good, yes? Does anybody see any problems with this? How many people in that community have smartphones? What about the social distribution of folks with smartphones? What about the mobility opportunities of folks in the community to be able to get around quickly enough to take advantage of the information from the smartphones? How fast are single mothers with kids on their backs or getting their children ready for school going to be in chasing the water truck? And what about people with physical disabilities? What language is the information being entered into, and what is the language of the folks who are looking for the water? And what is the political message that the app is providing? Is it contributing to mobilizing local people to demand their rights as citizens to access good drinking water, or simply ensuring that those who have the resources will be able to get the drinking water and the devil can look after the rest? Too bad you weren't born a lawyer, maybe next time. Background. Land records are being digitized in an area of small, this is happening all over the world as a matter of fact. Land records are being digitized in an area of small landholders and farmers with traditional land rights, and then made publicly accessible to stabilize land ownership and to ensure that those with appropriate claims have legal backing for these. So what happened? Those who understood the system or who could afford to hire smart lawyers to represent them were able to establish their claims concerning contested titles, and those who couldn't lost out. The overall effect was rather to stabilize land claims and establish the rights of, rather than to establish land claims and establish the rights of the marginal and small landholders. The effect was to cause a significant shift in land ownership to the already well-established landowners, to lawyers, and to the already wealthy. Sorry, what's happening here? I'm sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, the data divide. Access, according to the Internet World Statistics, only 30% of the world have Internet access, roughly 10% in Africa. Hardware, some 20% of the world's population owns a computer, so how many people in the world are able to directly access open data? Software, about half a billion people use Microsoft Office. What numbers have access to software to handle a data spreadsheet? Over half of the world's population is functionally illiterate. The average readability level of American state and federal websites is at the 11th grade level, and yet half of Americans read at the 8th grade level or lower. What proportion are able to read, comprehend open data sites? I think somebody might have mentioned this site earlier, but one of the significant model sites in the UK was theyworkforyou.org. Somebody did an evaluation of it. The demographics of the users of these sites found that they are those who would otherwise already be influential. They were older, richer, more likely to be male, and better educated. Those who had the influence were getting more influence. So who is able to access and use open data? Is open data simply another way to recreate and solidify existing social, economic, and political inequalities? Is open data simply empowering the already empowered? Now, this is an example from the other side. Open data as though people mattered. I think some of you will probably know this better than I do, but California's statewide epidemiological study is sponsored by the University of Southern California, and it's done, I believe, every 2 years. The incidence of various conditions are broken down by electoral district. Low-income community experiencing, a specific low-income community was experiencing exceptionally large numbers of cases of acute asthma. This local community has a local community association with staff who are aware of this epidemiological study. The USC program provides training for non-technical people on how to make use of the data that they are making available. The community organizer from the low-income community takes the course from the USC. The community organizer reanalyzed the data showing incidences of asthma occurring in the identified community by precinct, plotted on a map. So what do you think happened? Once the data was plotted on a map, the community realized that the high incidence of asthma tracked closely the location of the interstate highway that cut through the community and was highest around the truck stops on the interstate. Armed with this data, the community was able to launch a lobbying effort with the state legislature to get protective walls built on the interstate as it passed through the area, and a change in the regulations covering the idling of trucks in the truck stop area. Some lessons learned. I call this effective data use. Paying attention to the infrastructure, technical infrastructure, hardware and software of the data. Not everyone has access to a smartphone. Paying attention to the language of the data, both the technical language and the natural language. Not everyone speaks tech, and not everyone speaks the dominant language. This is particularly an issue in Africa, where much of the open data is coming out in English, and the vernacular language is very seldom English. Paying attention to the user. Some potential users, I prefer to call them citizens, may not be able to scramble fast enough to get to the water truck. Paying attention to the link between the data and the user citizen. Not everyone is a highly paid data analyst consultant. Some folks can't afford them, and most people don't nor should they need to have the skills to be able to analyze and use government data, publicly provided data. So the issues. Data literacy, somebody mentioned that earlier. Access to the means to analyze and use data. That data literacy meaning the capacity to understand and use data. Access to the means to analyze and use data. That is, having the expertise to understand how data can be used. The relevance of data to particular requirements. The issue of not so much the data dump, but being able to identify the specific areas of interest to the community that the data may be useful. I think the Pittsburgh example that somebody quoted was very, very interesting. And then the form that the open data takes and how that works itself out in practice. That is, what is the form of the data that's being provided and how does that work? So the different significance of open data in developed countries. There's a different significance of open data in developed countries and in less developed countries. Certainly there's a difference in the availability of data, the question of the language of the data, access to the equipment, skills to use the data. The provenance of the data. What's the source of the data? How accurate is it? Who's producing it and under what circumstances? And then the capacity to use data and data divides in specific countries. The World Bank is very proud of its program in many parts of the world, but they really are failing to take into account the vast differences in skill and capacity within the various communities. So I talk about effective use, which is providing the training, devices, expertise, support, and appropriate kind of information to support the use at the local level, at the grassroots level of the data. Attention must be paid. Unless attention is paid, it's not going to happen. My argument, my suggestion is that any time that open data is provided, that a certain proportion of funding, say 10%, be allocated to ensure that the broadest possible use of the data will be made for education, for training, to hire local to hire consultants to work with local communities, and so on. In the absence of attention being paid to ensure that open government, and particularly open government data, proceeds within a framework of defined and planned for inclusion, the result will be a continuing digital and now data exclusion, and also the creation and recreation of structures of social and economic exclusion and discrimination. Thank you.